The recent events in the Jujutsu Kaisen manga has caused immeasurable chaos, but even though we all witnessed Satoru Gojo completely annihilating the so-called king of all curses, we are nowhere near the climax of this battle. Gege Akutami has only given us a taste of what's to come. The reason being is because once we see this, then the real fight has begun.
Sukunaの名を冠し、死後呪物として時代を渡る四郎さえ、僕らは消し去ることができなかった。
The real mystery that we will be diving into would be Sukuna's hidden curse technique, which we first had come across in chapter 115 of the manga. What Sukuna had done was utter some concealed words and proceed to say open. Once he had done that, he went on to play around with some flames and then create a flaming bow and arrow out of it. This would then go on to obliterate Jogo, who he himself is one of the most renowned flame users in the entire series. So what we know is that Sukuna does indeed have another curse technique other than his dismantle and cleave. However, this black box ability is Sukuna's trump card, and it will allow him to get leverage once again in his battle against Satoru Gojo.
力以外の序列はつまらんな。貴様には借りがあるからな。小僧の体をものにしたら真っ先に殺してやる。
スクナに狙われるなんて光栄だね。
Throughout JJK, we've come across a wide variety of curse techniques. Some are incredibly powerful, yet has flaws and weaknesses that other curse techniques can target. Some would even allow you to switch places and teleport with every clap. But there are only a select few which defy all odds and barely have any weaknesses. Of course, from what we know from the top of our heads would be the Gojo clan's Limitless technique and the Zenin clan's 10 Shadow technique. But what if I were to tell you that there is a curse technique which surpasses all and is as effective as a domain expansion? Essentially, what we know about Sukuna's black box technique is absolutely nothing. But that's why I'm here to sort of give you guys an idea of what it may be. Anyways, for this, I stumbled on a Reddit theory from 3 years ago by Kaito Dairenji, as they had broken down Sukuna's original curse technique known as Dismantle and Cleave. But what is revealed in this theory would surprise a lot of us, since it actually makes sense. All credit goes to Kaito Dairenji for this theory. Be sure to check his Reddit page out, I'll leave the link down below. Anyways, the big reveal as to what Sukuna's black box technique could be is a storing ability. What exactly do I mean by this? Well, for that we will need to dwell into Sukuna's origins and his true form, which would be when Sukuna had 4 arms and 2 faces. It would be in chapter 117 that we would be able to see Sukuna's full form as depicted by Akutami. What we can see is how Sukuna of course has 4 arms accompanied by his usual markings. His face would be split as though he were wearing a mask on one side. But the key detail here would be the spear and dagger in which Sukuna is holding. The meanings behind these go so much more deeper than we think, as those 2 specific weapons that a full form Sukuna is holding intertwined with Hinduism and Buddhist beliefs. So starting off with the spear, as this would be known as Trishula within Hindu beliefs. In Indonesian, Trishula usually refers specifically to a long-handled trident. The Trishula is wielded by the Lord Shiva as well as the goddess Durga. The meaning behind the Trishula represents various trinities, but the main 3 would be creation, preservation and destruction. So it would seem that the inspiration for Sukuna's trident would be from Lord Shiva's Trishula. It is stated that the Trishula contains the entire power of the universe, as well as many powerful deities being stored within it. Next would be the dagger, which we see Sukuna holding. As this also stems from Hinduism, this dagger would be classed as the Vajra. This weapon would be a legendary and ritualistic weapon, symbolizing the properties of a diamond, or indestructibility in other words, and a thunderbolt, which would represent an irresistible force. The Vajra is a weapon which belonged to Indra, who was the Vedic king of the Devas and heaven. According to Hinduism, the Vajra is considered one of the most powerful weapons in the universe. In Buddhist beliefs, the Vajra, which is depicted in Hinduism, is also accompanied by a bell. This bell would be known as the Ganta, which is a ritual bell. So what exactly is the function of the Ganta? It is said that by ringing the bell, the devotee informs the deity of his or her arrival. The sound of the bell is considered auspicious, which welcomes divinity and dispels evil. The sound of the bell is said to disengage the mind from ongoing thoughts, thus making the mind more receptive. Bell ringing during prayer is said to help in controlling the ever-wandering mind and focus on the deity. So what we've uncovered so far are the two weapons which we saw Sukuna holding, known as the Trishula and Vajra. These two weapons were classed as universal in terms of power. However, what role does the Gantha have to play in this? Well, from the Buddhist belief, once the sound of the bell goes off, it drives out evil spirits whilst the ritual is being performed. It is also stated that the sound of the bell is just like a phenomenon which arises, radiates forth, and then dissolves back into emptiness. So if we put two and two together, once the sound of the Gantha has gone off, it creates a barrier like no other. So what I want you guys to do is keep this stored in the back of your minds. It will play a pivotal role in how Sukuna will use these against Satoru Gojo. Now back to why I believe Sukuna has a storing ability. Looking back on Sukuna's full form design, the markings on his body indicate something much more interesting. We see on Sukuna's forehead there is a marking that looks exactly like the Trishula, and then there is a marking across his nose which represents the Vajra. So I guess you could say the markings on Sukuna's body represent the sort of cursed tools and cursed techniques at his disposal. This part here will make a lot more sense to you guys. On both of Sukuna's shoulders we see various black boxes marked on his body, as well as circles on each of his shoulders, but I want us to focus on the boxes marked over Sukuna's body. Some could say it's a far-fetched idea, but I think that it definitely relates to Sukuna's black box technique. It is said that Sukuna has 16 of these black box markings all over his body, which I'm still not sure about, but we will go with it. Anyways, those 16 boxes would represent the 16 curse techniques which Sukuna has stored from the golden age of sorcerers. These would be stolen curse techniques. Understanding Sukuna's character is that he wouldn't steal curse techniques which he deems boring. For example, when he had killed Nanako in chapter 112, after killing her he goes on to state, "The phone, no, it's probably the camera, most likely to do with manipulating the photograph subject, how boring." Meaning that Sukuna's black box technique may be a monstrous version of Yuta's copy ability, but Sukuna can use those techniques for an unrestricted amount of time. So the big question now is, where does Sukuna store these cursed techniques and cursed tools? Well, that is through his malevolent shrine. Gege Akutami would clearly state in one of his interviews that Sukuna will consume someone, and that someone could be an important character. Now if we gather all the clues together, Sukuna's black box technique is related to the shrine within Sukuna's domain expansion. We always see countless skulls and bones surrounding the mouth, and it would be in chapter 226 when Gojo had destroyed the shrine in order to escape Sukuna's domain. However, it would be in chapter 228 where things would go left unexplained. Sukuna would trap Gojo inside of a domain which is incredibly small. Gojo was facing off against the mouth itself. It's at this point where Akutami kept things very vague. What Sukuna attempted to do was consume Satoru Gojo through the shrine, which would then leave Gojo for dead and Sukuna obtaining the limitless technique. The reason why Gojo was able to escape this situation was all solely because of his 6 eyes, because in that chapter, Akutami focused a lot on Gojo's eyes. So the shrine is a very important factor to Sukuna's black box curse technique. As the mouth consumes an individual, it will then store its curse technique for Sukuna to use. We also take it back to Sukuna's pridefulness. He will only steal curse techniques worthy of stealing. That's why he attempted to encapsulate Gojo inside of a very tiny barrier, allowing the mouth of the shrine to be at close distance to Gojo. But of course, Gojo's 6 eyes would see through all of that. Just like I mentioned before, I told you guys to keep the Trishula, Vajra and Gantha in the back of your heads. So now we will reveal how Sukuna will use these to his advantage against Gojo alongside his black box technique. From what was revealed in chapter 235 of Jujutsu Kaisen is that Gojo essentially pulled off a suicide attack with his hollow purple and successfully damaged Sukuna, so much so that it put an end to Maharaga's terror and left the king of all curses in tatters. It was to the point where even Sukuna was panicking on how to avoid Gojo's insane attacks. But what if I told you that Sukuna's motives were to consume Gojo instead of out and out killing him? It makes sense, especially from what he attempted to do in chapter 228. We don't know if it's Sukuna's first time coming up against a 6 eyes and limitless user, but he did seem somewhat taken back at Gojo's abilities. If it is his first time coming up against someone with that skill set, then Sukuna's hunger would be to steal the 6 eyes and limitless technique. Still not so sure about the 6 eyes, but still even the limitless technique is an ability that anybody would desire. Another reason why Sukuna's motives were just to consume him instead of killing him was because Sukuna not once used his own curse technique against Gojo, but instead kept spamming his domain expansion. He had also kept using Megami's curse technique with the 10 shadows and Mahoraga. That was all a ploy to simply beat down Gojo to the point where he can't move and then consume him into the shrine, ultimately ripping away Gojo's techniques and gifting them to Sukuna. So what is the next phase of this battle since Sukuna was unsuccessful in consuming Gojo via the shrine? Well, don't be surprised if you hear the sound of a bell at some point in this battle. What we studied about the 3 divine weapons from Hindu and Buddhist beliefs is how once the Ganta is set off, the sound in itself would create an unworldly barrier that captivates anyone who can hear it. With Sukuna on the ropes, maybe someone like Uraume or Kenjaku sets this bell off, thus making a barrier around the king of all curses where no one can enter. This will then lead to a ritual performed by both Kenjaku and Uraume, as this may lead to us witnessing the true form of Ryomen's Sukuna. As for what events happened before this is unknown. Maybe Sukuna consumes Yuji in order to access this full form, who knows. I made a theory video about this, so check it out if you'd like. I'll leave the link down below. But once Sukuna reaches this final form, he will then have the Trishula and Vajra at his disposal, commencing the start of the real battle. Through these weapons, I believe that Sukuna would subdue Gojo and consume him through the shrine, leading to Gojo's death and also the rest of the sorcerers having to face off against a fully powered Ryomen's Sukuna, who now has access to the 6 eyes and limitless techniques. Anyways, that was my take on Sukuna's current position in this battle. Akutami has only given us the starter. If what I said does come true, then you know who to thank. Anyways, what did you guys think of this theory, and what exactly is Sukuna's black box technique? Be sure to let me know your thoughts down below. As always, like this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you all in the next one.